Welcome to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing, founder of the Reiki Business Collective and creator of the Build Your Reiki Business program, sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Greetings, welcome, and thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. It's Christian of Standing Stones Healing, and of course, as always, I am grateful and honored to have you here with me, so thank you so very much. In this week's episode, we're talking about sharing messages in our Reiki sessions with clients. Now, first, I want to talk about exactly what this is. And so if you are tuning in, maybe you're brand new to Reiki, I don't want to assume that everyone who tunes in is someone who's very familiar with Reiki, although probably you are. But even if you aren't new to Reiki, maybe you haven't really heard much about sharing messages in sessions. That's absolutely okay. We're going to talk about that. But I want to first define what I mean by sharing messages. And probably many of you know exactly what I mean and don't need any further explanation. But during our sessions, sometimes for some Reiki practitioners, and many times for some Reiki practitioners, we might get intuitive information during a session. That information can come in all kinds of different forms. It can be visions, it can be sensations, it can be sounds or smells, all of the clair senses, just as a general feeling. It can be any of those. And so when we are receiving messages, if we do in a session, they can come to us in all different kinds of ways. There's no one particular way that they might come through, and there's no one particular way that they might show up. And for many practitioners, they might get information in all different kinds of ways. Some might get information in one specific kind of way, like hearing things, for instance. So when it comes to messages, the range of messages and the ways in which we might receive them are as vast as the number of Reiki practitioners themselves. So when it comes to receiving messages in a session, the range is extremely wide, and it's all very much an individual kind of experience. Some practitioners may receive no quote messages or information. They might not have anything that comes through intuitively during a session. And then you can have some practitioners who start getting messages, intuitive information, even before the session begins. And so there truly is a wide range. Now, I want to say that when it comes to sharing messages, the very first thing that I want to emphasize is that it's not part of the traditional system of Reiki. And so there is no specific tactic or technique for experiencing messages from a session or for sharing them. And it's not a specifically system of Reiki kind of thing. And so when we talk about sharing messages or getting messages in a session, I think it's really important that we first recognize and acknowledge that receiving messages and sharing them is not part of the system of Reiki. Now, we talk about it so much that we might think that this is just a thing that happens as part of the system of Reiki, and it's not part of the traditional system of Reiki. So it's important to acknowledge that. Now, receiving messages isn't wrong. And it can indeed have its place in the system of Reiki, first acknowledging that it's not part of the system of Reiki, and second, making sure that we are doing it in a healthy way that honors the client. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But when it comes to my own experience, I can and do and have received messages during sessions. Now, primarily during my distance sessions is really when I receive the most information, or I should say have generally in my Reiki practice received the most information. And I will say that with my very first distance session, I received information. And when I talk about the sharing of information, in my own experience, in my own training, this was not something that my teachers talked about. So in many Reiki trainings, teachers will talk about receiving messages. They may even encourage their students to receive messages, maybe even talk about how to share messages. In my training, there was none of that. And I actually really appreciate that, because then there was no expectation that we would receive information or that we should. There was only one mention of it. It was really just a mention in our training. I forget what level it was, maybe level 2, when one of my teachers said, or both of my teachers, I had 2 teachers, said, you may receive information, you may get messages or sensations or see things during your sessions. And that was really it. And then my teacher gave an example of one time when this one thing happened for her. And that was it. And so I didn't, through my training, have the expectation that I would receive messages or even the pressure that I should, which I want to thank my teachers for, because that was really beneficial for me on my own Reiki journey. Because it needs to be emphasized that not everyone receives messages, and that it's not a requirement, and that there's nothing wrong with us as Reiki practitioners if we don't. It doesn't make us any less of a Reiki practitioner. And, oh yeah, by the way, it's not even part of the system of Reiki. And so for me, though, when I had I didn't have the expectation that I would receive messages, but when I had my very first Reiki session, distance Reiki session with my friend, I did receive messages. I had intuitive sensations. I saw things. It was a very different experience from any of my in-person training sessions. And the thing was, I didn't think it was weird. It just felt completely natural and normal to me. I wasn't taken aback by it. I wasn't like, what's this information? What do I do with this? It was just very natural and normal. And I just simply talked about the things that I saw and experienced with my friend, my client, at the end of the session. And she talked to me. She had experiences too and talked to me about those. And so when I spontaneously started receiving messages, I didn't think anything of it. It just felt so natural and normal to me. But I do want to emphasize again that if you don't receive messages during your sessions at all, ever, it doesn't mean that Reiki is not working. I get this question a lot. What is wrong? Why am I not getting messages? First and foremost, there is nothing that you are doing wrong. Second of all, yes, Reiki is still working. Third of all, no, you don't have to receive messages. And fourth of all, sometimes it's better when we don't. So, it's sometimes better when we don't, because I really believe that so often Reiki practitioners are doing more harm than good with the messages that they share, and the ways in which they share messages. Now, for me on my Reiki journey in my sessions, I've gotten all kinds of information. I've seen things, I've had visions, I've had sensations, heat and coughing and just all kinds of things. I've heard things, heard messages, just all kinds of things. Have I smelled things too? I think I've probably smelled things a few times. Out of all the sessions I've done, I'm positive at some point I've smelled things. And so in my experience, the information has come in all kinds of ways, maybe for you too. But when I share information with a client, I'm always really very careful about what kind of information I share and how I share it. And I think it's very important for us to be really mindful of the kind of information that we are passing on to clients and how we are doing it, because I really truly do believe that oftentimes we are doing more harm than good with the information that we are sharing and how we are sharing it. So let me give you an example. I once had a client who had had a Reiki session before. And when I asked her, have you had a Reiki session before? She said, yes, she had, but she didn't have a good experience with it because the practitioner told her that her heart chakra was blocked. And that was a negative experience for her. She didn't like being told that. She wasn't told, what it meant or what to do about it or anything, but it meant that she left that session with a negative impression of the session. And it's surprising that she was willing to come in for another session, because that kind of negative first impression of Reiki can have a lasting impact on our clients. But this is so very common, isn't it? I know I've been told by a Reiki practitioner in a session that I had a few years ago, oh, the back of your heart chakra is blocked. Remember, the chakras have a front and a back. Oh, and the back of your heart chakra is blocked. I'm sorry. What the heck does that even mean? Someone out there listening is being like, oh, I can't wait to tell you, Christian, exactly what it means. Okay, please spare me. Because when it comes to sharing this information and sharing it in this kind of way, we can and do leave a client with the sense of, what's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me. I'm broken. I'm blocked. This is my fault. And I need to fix it. I'm bad. I've done something wrong. Oh, and then here comes us, the great Reiki practitioner, who's going to fix it, who's going to unblock the chakras, who's going to fix the back of their heart chakra, and who is going to fix all of the things that are wrong with them. And so I think that when it comes to the sharing of information, I'll just say it. I think sometimes we can have almost a savior kind of complex in which we are here to fix people on an energetic level. And I will say that, yep, I've done it too. One of the messages that I often receive in sessions, well, I won't say often, but when I do, it's very clear to me. So I'll see the image of a thorn that symbolizes some kind of like wounding that the person has, some kind of stuck energy that needs to be removed. And this can appear as metal, pieces of metal, in a more advanced stage. So it starts out as thorns. I've personally pulled thorns from myself in my sessions. Then, maybe slivers of metal, nails, and a big honking sword one time. And so to me, that image is the message that, oh, there's some wounding here, there's a challenge here, there's some stuck energy that needs to be moved or whatever. But that says more about me than it does about the client. That says more about how things appear in my sessions to me than it does about the client and their experience. And so, if I were to say to a client in a session, I pulled this big honking sword out of your sacral chakra, and that means that you've got some real issues that you need to work with. Well, that's not very nice, first of all, and it may be very true, second of all, but it's true for all of us. We all have lots of issues to work through. We all have big honking swords that need to be removed. So it's very important that we are really careful about what we share and how we share it, because we really don't want a client to leave feeling like there's something wrong with them, feeling that they've done something wrong, or feeling that they need to be fixed. They're broken and they need to be fixed. And especially, oh, by the way, pay me, come back and pay me and I'll fix it for you. So I think it's important for us to be mindful of that. I will say that on my Reiki journey, I do receive fewer and fewer messages and less and less information. And I don't think that this is a bad thing. I actually think it's an evolution of my journey, my Reiki journey, in really, I think, kind of shedding that feeling that I need to offer messages, or the expectation or the pressure to offer messages. Because let's admit that sometimes we feel the pressure to share messages. I know I've seen it again and again. I've been asked this question again and again. I don't receive messages. I'm afraid that at the end of the session, the client is going to ask me about information that I received and I don't get any. So let's admit that oftentimes we do feel that pressure. And let's really work first and foremost to take that pressure off of ourselves and to take it off of one another. And let's stop expecting that we will receive messages, and let's stop expecting that others will as well. I recently had an in-person session with another Reiki practitioner. And once the session was over, she sat up from the table and she said to me, "Do you receive messages?" And well, yeah, I do, yeah. I'm thinking, oh no, I know where this is going. Well, did you get anything? Did you receive any messages? And for that session, I believe I did have an image, but it was inconsequential. It was like, so what? That's not going to inform her journey. It's not going to, in my estimation, of course, who am I to say? I'm making the judgment that it wouldn't have made a difference to her, but it probably wouldn't have. But of course, as another Reiki practitioner, she had that question, do you receive messages, Christian? And do you have anything for me? That expectation was there for her. And so, how did I handle it and how do I recommend handling it? So if you don't receive messages or information, or let's say that you do and you just don't feel comfortable sharing it, whatever it might be, or you're not quite sure how to share it, it's okay to just say, I didn't see anything that was wrong. I didn't receive any negative information. That's exactly how I handled it in that particular situation. I said, yeah, no, I didn't see anything. Everything's okay. Everything's great. And then I ask them about their experience. What about you? How was the experience for you? And turn it back onto the client, because here's what really matters: the client's experience. It doesn't really matter what we saw, what we experienced, what chakra we unblocked. What really matters is the client's experience. And if we truly are practicing the system of Reiki and striving to grow and evolve on our Reiki journey, then I do believe that the less we are attached to having things to share with a client and feeling that expectation and that pressure to share, almost as if like, oh no, I have to perform for this client. I have to share messages in order to prove that I did something, or in order to prove that I know what I'm doing, in order to prove that I'm a good practitioner. Of course, Reiki calls us to do exactly the opposite. The system of Reiki calls us to let go and release the expectation and the pressure, and to just allow Reiki to do its thing without the need to control it or to offer messages or to, quote, fix things that are wrong with our clients on an energetic or otherwise kind of level. And so Reiki calls us to do this. And I believe that it's important for us to make sure that if we are sharing messages, that they are coming from a place of love and kindness and compassion and what's best for the client, and not from our own ego. And I also think it's important to mention that, you know, a lot of times with the messages that we share and the information that we share, it can really border on things like medical diagnosis, which of course we never want to do. We never want to medically diagnose someone because we are indeed really opening ourselves up to some real potential legal problems with that. So we never want to medically diagnose. And I think this is especially true because when we do so, we can create a self-fulfilling prophecy for our clients. So let's say that I am sending Reiki and I receive the message that, oh no, there's something wrong with this client's solar plexus area. And oh no, I think there's something wrong with this client's stomach. Oh no, I think they've got a real problem with their stomach. And so if we say to a client after a session, you know, I'm really concerned about some sensations I was having at your stomach, and, you know, I really think you should go get that checked out. Well, now we've just created a real sense of worry with the client, and maybe they didn't have any stomach issues whatsoever. Maybe they had no stomach problems, and now they do because they are worried. And so we can actually create problems for our clients and indeed do more harm than we are good because, let's be real, the power of suggestion is indeed powerful. And so I really want to encourage us to steer very clear away from any kind of medical diagnosis and to allow the client to narrate their own experience without us telling them what we felt, what we saw, and what our experience was, because then we're really turning the session into something that is about us, and the session truly is about the client and their own healing. Whatever that healing is and whatever it needs to be, it's not up to us to determine what a client's healing is and where they need to heal. That's up to them. And so I will say that less and less in my sessions do I receive information, and do I even worry or care to receive information to pass on. I also want to mention that if we do, which again, you know, I don't think it's a terribly bad or wrong thing to share information with clients. But if we do, and if we feel called to, I believe it's very important to get client permission. And so I think it's very important to get their okay to share anything that comes up. I know for me, I do this at the beginning of the session where I say, sometimes during a session, I might receive intuitive information. I might see images or, receive messages. How do you feel? Is that something that you would like me to mention to you if I do? And if they say yes, then I might. Again, I might even not. It really depends, number one, on if I remember. I've had messages come through in sessions that I actually just don't even remember. And also, exactly what that information is, because I believe that sometimes we might receive information and it isn't about the client. It is about us. And maybe it's not even meant for the client, but is rather meant for us. And I believe that's all okay. So I want to encourage us to release any judgment that we feel of ourselves. Number one, if we don't receive messages, no, there's nothing wrong with you as a Reiki practitioner. No, it's not even part of the system of Reiki. Number two, I want to encourage us to release the expectation and the pressure to share messages. And if we do share information and messages, to first of all do so with client permission and to do so sparingly in a spirit of love and compassion and kindness, and to simply be very, very careful about how we share information, because our words are powerful and people are coming to us for help, for assistance, for healing, for whatever their needs might be. And so let's recognize that power dichotomy and how that can have an impact on our sharing of messages and how they are received by clients. Of course, there's so much to say about the sharing of messages. Do you receive messages in your Reiki sessions? Probably you do. If you don't, you're not alone. And do you share messages and information? If so, how? Join us in the Reiki Business Collective Facebook group and tell us all about it at facebook.com/groups/Reiki Biz. Well, whether you receive messages or not, I'm asking you to please, if you do, share them with kindness and compassion and be mindful of the ways in which indeed we can do more harm than good. And as always, I'm sending lots of blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Thanks for tuning in to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, and send to a friend. Learn more about the Build Your Reiki Business program at standingstoneshealing.com/build. Sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business.